you.
Thank you very much, Remy. Thank you for the great introduction. And I'm delighted to say that Brian Hoskins just finished on that note around partnership. And our panel is going to, we're going to talk about partnerships. And we have three very important stakeholders sitting here in this panel who represent institutions that are partners in looking at our topic, which is looking at what skills we need as the region transitions, and also how do we train people up for the mine of the future. So I'm going to start by introducing, Remy already introduced my panel members roughly, but I'll go through them just so that you can put a face to the name. On my left here, I have Michelle Allomer. She's a metallurgical engineer at Ma'aden, but she's also a member of Women in Mining in Saudi Arabia, which was only set up, I think, about a year ago. Is that right, Michelle?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. And then I've got Adnan. I'm going to wreck your pronunciation of your surname. I'm sorry.
Abu Saud.
Okay, thank you. And Adnan is a consultant at the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resource here in Saudi Arabia. And finally, I have Roderick Eggert. We're going to refer to him as Rod today. And Rod's the professor of economics and business. And the Coulter Foundation Chair in Mineral Economics at the Colorado School of Mines in Denver in the United States. So I guess we're, just to recap on what we're going to talk about today, and which is obviously based on skills and based on what skills the region needs to develop and to hone in on as it transitions from into a green metals hub, and also what skills the sector as a whole really needs to create the labor force of the future. But we're also going to widen our conversation, not just about what are the skills and how do we train people, but also I want to tease out some thoughts from my panel members on the challenges and the opportunities, and what works, what hasn't really worked, and then we're going to finish on some action points. So, panel, help me set the scene here. The skill sets in the mining sector has changed markedly over the last 10, 15 years in my observation, as sustainability is put at the heart of business. And Saudi Arabia is no different. We've heard all through the last 2 days how Saudi is putting sustainability at the heart of everything it does, because it recognizes, as do others, you cannot have a successful mining business if it is not sustainable and if it is not responsible. So that has meant that skills have changed, and not necessarily been replaced, but probably just widened and probably just been augmented. Now, some of this is partly due to the changing expectations of stakeholders, as stakeholders become sort of more skeptical about business and about mining, but it's also changed because it's actually the right thing to do. Now, the challenge that we face, understanding that situation that we're currently in, is, and I think the last panel touched on this, is the next generation that hold the skills that we need don't necessarily want to come into the mining sector. So what do we do about that? And how do we approach that, and how do we identify the issue and solve for that problem? Now, Rod, I'm going to turn to you first and ask you, as an academic, what skills do you believe are needed in the sector? What are you teaching your students? And what is working in the way in which you teach and the approach that you take? And how do you attract that next generation into these courses?
You've asked me several questions.
A lot of questions, sorry. See if you can unpack them.
Let me try to provide a starting point for at least several of those, and start by making, I think, an observation that's very true, but nevertheless doesn't get us very far, and that is to observe that we need skills across the entire range of disciplines that are important in the mineral sector. So it starts perhaps with geosciences and science generally, and engineering, economic analysis, and so on and so forth. That by itself is not terribly helpful. I guess a second opening comment or point would be we can think of core competencies as a synonym for skills. And one thing that has not changed is, at least in degree-seeking students or in students who earn a degree over several years, we need both depth and breadth. Depth in a discipline, and in my view, it almost doesn't matter what discipline you have depth in. A discipline provides a framework and a way of approaching an issue that I think is beneficial regardless of what you end up doing. In terms of breadth, I think what's especially important now is comfort with numbers. Even if you major in a non-quantitative, if you have depth in a non-quantitative area, you need to be comfortable with numbers and quantitative analysis and statistics, and that's regardless of which area you're in. A second aspect of breadth, I would say economic analysis, and economics not just in the narrow project economic sense. What does it cost to develop an undeveloped resource, and relate how profitable might it be? But broader, at least appreciation of how a project can have broader spillover benefits and negative consequences on a community and region, and even broader still, understanding how the market and policy environment, the broad market and policy environment influences your particular activity, whatever activity it is, whether it's as a junior mining company or as a manager of an operating mine or a senior executive involved in strategic decision making.
So it really is.
That's probably enough.
Yeah, that is, because it is that intersectionality, as you say, of breadth and depth, and not moving away, just broadening out the necessity for non-technical, non-financial, non-data driven skill set without not including them, because as you say, you still need to understand the data. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to bounce around a little bit, because one of the another challenge that we find is just picking up the data point is, as we move to IR 4.0 and automation, digitization, Internet of Things, it throws up a huge amount of opportunity, especially around diversity. And the other panel previously just touched on that. But it also throws up consequences, moving into IR 4.0. And I'm just going to turn to you, Adnan, because I'd love to hear from you, in the context of the Saudi government and approach, how do you mitigate any consequences, or how do you think about the mitigation of any consequences to the traditional workforce?
Thank you for that, Carol. I think it's a very important topic to touch upon, and probably would take hours of discussion to come through with a verdict for this one. But I think we need to have a positive mindset when it comes to IR 4.0, as it is a main driver for developed and advanced industrial and mining sectors. Thus, I think we should look at it as it should be harnessed as opportunities rather than mitigated as threats. So for that to happen, we must acknowledge the effects of IR 4.0 and the disruption it could cause on the workforce. Automation is expected to lead to job losses in some field, but it also supports the emergence of new jobs within other fields. The jobs that are mostly affected by the Industrial Revolution are those that are routine jobs, that are easily replaceable with automation. But yet we're forecasting that in the future it might take over more jobs. But with the right approach and mindset, we can use technology to support and enable people rather than think about it replacing people. And I'm going to give a small example, maybe it's not the most relevant to our discussion today, but while preparing for this panel, I did use some new tool that's emerging. It's an AI bot that helps you do research and write content. And it did help me a lot, but did not completely factor out the human involvement, which is me, to like filter out the results and understand what's happening. So it did save me some time. So that goes back to the fact that we need to think about it as an opportunity that needs to be harnessed rather than a threat. Governments currently are approaching this in two different ways. So there's the proactive approach, and then there's the reactive approach. The proactive approach is preparing a generation that is ready to be part of the IR 4.0, which is something Germany, for example, is working on. They have an initiative called the Digital Pact that aims to raise a generation with high literacy towards IR 4.0. This requires, this is a long-term solution that requires a lot of time and effort between the government, the educational institutions, as well as the private sector. The reactive approach, which is working closely with the private sector to reskill or upskill your current workforce or labor into other skills that are more relevant to what's happening right now. This approach is adopted by the UK, for example. They do have an initiative called Talent 2030 that aims to support workers in reskilling or upskilling in topics like AI, data science, blockchain, and other skills that are demanded right now.
Thank you. So that's the good news is that humans are still needed. It's using AI or technology speeds up the process and gets rid of the the repetitive grunt work, but we still need to have human beings there. Michelle, you have obviously been coming from university and then working abroad and now coming to Saudi and working with Modern. What do you see that in that experience that you've had about how to mitigate any unintended consequence of moving to IR 4.0?
First of all, I'm delighted to be here again this year. It's exciting. It's really amazing to see the evolvement of the conference over 1 year. I see some familiar faces, so I'm really happy. To answer your question, during the studies, I graduated in 2016, so it's not that far back, but I can see a lot of advancements happening in the degrees of the people that are graduating this year and in the coming 4 years, where there's more focus on data science, statistics, and integration of AI, artificial intelligence. That's something that maybe I didn't have the privilege to really delve into. But studying metallurgy and mineral processing engineering, and coming here and seeing the destination that the mining industry is heading to, it's a really important element to have that included as part of the degree of all engineering, not just metallurgy.
Yeah, exactly. And Rod, I'm going to throw that back to you because that's one of the things you were talking about before we came onto the stage today, was that integration. So, integrating data plus, other social science or anthropology or whatever. How are you actually doing it with the students and with the courses and the design of the curriculum?
Well, at the undergraduate level, there continues to be an emphasis on engineering design, but I think engineering design has become more multifaceted than it had in the past, and it's not just being responsive to a client the way it might have been, and that narrowly defined as it may have been in the past, but it's thinking about the in a proactive sense, the impact that your engineering solution may have on a community or on the environment, and anticipating that and building that into your solution as opposed to thinking about it after the fact. So that's one specific example. In my academic program, Mineral and Energy Economics, so I'm not an engineer, so don't ask me too many engineering questions. I have found it, and we have found it very important to have a mix of academic backgrounds in the student body, in the cohort of students. And sure, I like to think of myself as having a major positive impact on the students through imparting abilities in economic analysis. But I think the fact of the matter is that the students learn just as much from each other, and having a mix of students, maybe some with environmental science, some cultural anthropology and community relations, as well as science, engineering, and economics in some of the coursework is very important.
And I guess the converse is true as well. My daughter studied anthropology at university in the UK, in Manchester, and she was, they were introducing, I guess, to your point, Michelle, she's obviously a lot younger than you, or a little bit younger than you, but they had, they were introducing data and AI and into the coursework. So it's, the opposite is true as well. How do the universities address the, say, social sciences or the non-technical subject matters or degree courses and link them back into the technical part? Because I think that, I don't know, Rod, how it works at the Colorado School of Mines, but how do you sweep for kids coming out of university or even going into university to tell them about the mining industry? So my daughter is lucky because she has a mom who works in the mining industry, so she's been indoctrinated since she was very, very young. But her friends didn't, in the anthropology course, didn't know that actually there's really good jobs as an anthropologist working in mining anywhere in the world. So how do you sort of account for that, or do you have that sort of that connection across the faculties?
The simple answer, yes. I would say a deeper answer is to say that we, at the moment, probably have the best opportunity in my professional lifetime at attracting a new and different kind of student because of the visibility and excitement associated with decarbonization, whether decarbonization involves continued significant reliance on fossil fuels and making CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage possible, as well as the other methods of emissions reduction that involve wind, solar, and others, and the simple reality that mineral resources of a wide variety and the products and components and systems derived from them are foundational.
And therein lies the excitement of the sector that should be attracting that next generation. And if we can just pick up on that, and I can turn to you, Adnan, again, if we think about these wider skill sets, what approach is Saudi doing to devise these new skills?
So, given that Saudi is going through major reforms on so many aspects, so these are being addressed on a cross-sectorial level. It's a national program that was developed in 2000. It was announced by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince in 2019. It's part of the Vision 2030 program called the Human Capability Development Program, which has many objectives, but more notably for the purpose of our discussion today, is the first one is as we mentioned before, the proactive approach was ensure alignment of educational outputs with labor market And then there's the reactive part of it, which is expand vocational training to provide for labor market needs.
Thank you. And just sort of picking up on that point about upskill, because you're talking about, you know, creating from new and upskilling and reskilling. And if I could just pick up and come to you, Michelle, you mentioned to me before, with your experience and your observation, there are real transferable skills from the oil and gas sector to the mining sector.
Absolutely.
So if we're thinking about upskilling and reskilling, can you talk us through how that might happen and what are the differences between the two sectors as well?
Yes, I mean, when I say transferable skills, I mean the majority of the way the operations work. I mean, a plant is a plant, a tank is a tank, a pump engineer here is the same as a pump engineer there. So a lot of things are transferable, but there is a nuance and a challenge in the mining industry. You know, we're talking all about the new materials and the advanced materials, but we're also, you know, still working on our traditional materials that we are mining. And the employees of the future have to be aware that, you know, 4 or 5 years, 10 years from now, there is going to be a challenge in the way we mine these minerals. So if we want to talk about upskilling or reskilling, we need to really educate the employees of the way the mineral resources are becoming more challenging to mine. We don't have the luxury of the grade that we have now that we're going to have in 10 years. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, universal in terms of all mines across the world. And you add on to that, you know, we have the advancement of new materials, etc. So it's two parallel, I guess, streams that we need to think about when we're employing the employee of the future.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, that attracting and employing somebody who's got that critical thinking, yes, which is vital, yeah, and also, I guess, acknowledging the fact that we are now in a fast-moving, a fast-changing, I should say, industry. And by the way, the mining industry has not always been fast-changing, but I think we're starting to see that. So the three people that we have here on the stage, I think is was designed on purpose to showcase really the relationship between academia, government, and private enterprise or corporates. Can I ask all three of you sort of, you know, how do you see that relationship, not between you three individuals, but just conceptually between those three stakeholder groups? And then I'm going to finish on just one very quick fire question. Rod, can I start with you? Just on the relationship between the three stakeholder groups and what that means and how important it is.
Like many things in life, I think it boils down to effective communication. And so, from my perspective, those of us in the academic world have to listen to what industry needs are, what the local community needs are, what the industry and non-industry needs are in society. And as a first approximation, I would hope that governments would be able to at least partially be able to communicate and reflect non-company interests. I think as a mechanism, deviating a little bit from your question, but thinking about the opportunity for the kingdom in the workforce development space, I think there's an opportunity for the kingdom to become something of a regional hub and attracting a diverse set of students, both degree-seeking students and the existing professionals needing reskilling and upscaling, to interact with each other as cohorts of students that the kingdom might help to coordinate. So the kingdom and its university community serving as really an integrator across disciplines and across the region.
Right. And Adnan, can you expand on that?
Completely agree with what Dr. Rod just said. The three pillars you just mentioned, the government, the education institutions, and the private sectors, are moving parts of the same machine, let's say, and for it to work properly, they all need to work together through active communication.
Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, having the academia and the industry, we feed into each other. When the industry creates the job, we need the people from academia to be prepared and skilled for it. And the government is essential as a facilitator and an enabler for that.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Good. Now we get to the fun part. Quick question, quick fire question. You've got probably 20 seconds each. I'm going to start from on my left. So Michelle, get ready. I'm going to go for you first, and we'll go down the line. If you could think about the one or two skills that the mining sector needs now and for the future, what would they be?
Data literacy, so artificial intelligence, and emotional intelligence.
Ah, I like it. Data intelligence and emotional intelligence. Adnan?
I would say more specifically to our region, it might be the policy making for a number of reasons, mainly because it's still developing here in the country. As you may know, just a few years ago, we didn't have a complete legal framework for mining. And with time, there's going to be increasing complexities to include within these policies, just to be mindful of the communities, the environment, and the workforce themselves. So I think policymaking has a long way to go, and it's going to be much more needed in the future.
And Rod?
Mining engineers as integrators. And I say that because I think today much more depth in data science, in mechanical engineering, in electrical engineering, and so on are needed at the mine site. But what is often missing is the ability to integrate these, and I think mining engineering maybe can reinvent itself as a field that integrates the various aspects of mineral development.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you all, panel, for an amazing discussion. And please, thank you, audience, for attending. And please thank my panel.
Thank you very much, Carol, for moderating this panel and for different participants. So another very interesting conversation on the development of